According to the National Education Association, New Mexico ranks 29th in the nation for per pupil spending. We allocate about $2.7 billion to teach the state's school children. Yet New Mexico is near the bottom of the nation on almost all measures of educational success. Now, a landmark lawsuit that went to trial this week accuses the Public Education Department of violating the New Mexico Constitution by providing inadequate funding, especially for English language learners, Native Americans, and low-income students. Here to talk about this and other news of the week, I'm joined by Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group PR. Former House Minority Whip Dan Foley is here. Alicia Manzano from Strategies 360 is with us, and Sophie Martin. She's an attorney and editor of DukeCityFix.com. Sophie, I'm going to start with you on this one. Testimony started Monday. If you would lay out the two sides here and what the plaintiffs are looking for and the other side's looking for here.
So essentially, what the plaintiffs have built their case on largely is a provision in the state constitution that says that, and I'm paraphrasing, but says that education needs to be funded here in New Mexico. And so that's not just a statute, that's there in the Constitution. And their argument is that it has not been funded to adequate levels, and so they're attempting to present evidence to that end. The case is before Judge Sarah Singleton, and she made an early statement that seemed to indicate that the bar for evidence for the plaintiffs is going to be fairly high. They're going to need to demonstrate that it is not just sufficient, that it's not just kind of pretty much good enough. They're going to have to show that there's a real problem. The defense, the state, has said, you know, we are spending at a fairly high level here. And what I think is quite interesting is that Martinez's office has said, Governor Martinez's office has said, you know, this isn't just about education funding. This is about the deep-seated poverty here in New Mexico, which for a long time has been a progressive talking point. You can't fix everything. And we, you know, with a single bullet, you have to go after things like poverty. You have to go after a whole host of problems. And I think that's at the heart of, for instance, the Breakfast Before the Bell program, the idea that kids shouldn't be going to school hungry. Suddenly, the governor of this state is saying, oh, it's not this, it's this over here, which is also part of what the governor is supposed to be addressing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think it's a difficult suit, but what
in what sense it's difficult?
Well, I think that the bar is going to be fairly high to sort of define what is sufficient for the students and in terms of funding for education. But I also think at the same time, the plaintiffs have been able to make a great public showing here. They're able to take through this lawsuit, they're able to take their experts, put them in front of the press, put them in front of the public, and attempt to make the case not just in the court system, but also in the court of public opinion, that funding needs to change, and that our educational system needs to be
That's right. Alicia, let me amplify something Sophie mentioned about the high bar. There's a quote here: the plaintiffs must show a complete failure of the system such that the right of education for New Mexico school children is an empty promise. That is a pretty high bar. Those two words, three words, a complete failure. Are these folks going to be able to prove something like that?
Well, I think that if you look in rural counties, such as, I have some dear friends and family in Grant County, and I was hearing some stories about a school district down there going to a 4-day school week. What are parents going to do for childcare on that 5th day? What are the learning opportunities missed of just having 4 days? I've also heard of, you know, consolidating all kindergarten classes into one school. So you have to drive out of district to go to that school. I mean, we're hearing story upon story outside of Albuquerque, outside of the Albuquerque-Santa Fe area, and I think that's what this suit is targeting. It's those low-income students, it's Native American students, English language learners, and if you go out into these different counties, they are having to make do. And so yes, it is a high bar, but they are already proving that this is a big problem in the state.
That's right. Veronica Garcia, superintendent of Santa Fe Public Schools and also the superintendent for the state for schools
Secretary
here.
of Education.
Secretary of Ed. No slouch when it comes to these things. She's a pretty, you know, people know her.
Yeah, well, I got to say this, you know, she's definitely a liberal. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But she also, when I was in the legislature, you could communicate with her. I'm not sure, I'll defer to the people that are lawyers. I'm not sure that I would call the former Secretary of Education as my first witness, because my question would be, well, are we funding education more today than we were when you were there? Which the answer is yes. Are there more kids in the system or less kids? At best, it's stagnant. And I think that kind of puts us in a position. I think this is an argument, though, and a conversation. And Sophie's right. We have to have this conversation. Since I was in the legislature, we've always been the top 25% of funding education, whether it's per capita, percentage of budget, per pupil spending. But for some reason, we're not getting the outcomes. Now, the outcomes, there's a host of things. I mean, this whole notion that parents should not be held accountable is wrong. I mean, the parents have a large portion of the bear a brunt of the responsibility. I think there's definitely a poverty level issue and a cultural issue that has to be overcome. And when you're talking about taking kids to school and expecting them to understand, I remember going to a speech one time for track at the Metro Bank when the gentleman who's a famous track coach had taught at one of the reservation schools, and he said one of his star athletes about the third track meet, the kid was always the first one there. And he realized the kid was the first one there because he would stay the night in the dumpster. Because if he went home, he couldn't get back in time to leave.
Right.
And so, I mean, there's things like this that we're dealing with that they don't deal with in Boston. They don't deal with in New York. But I think that what this is really, I think, is going to highlight at the end of the day is that no matter what, and we're going to talk later about Scandera, Secretary Scandera leaving, but no matter what, it seems like we seem to be at an impasse in New Mexico between no matter what anybody says, it's no matter what these guys say, it's no, and we can't seem to advance. At the end of the day, I think you're going to find out. We had a lawsuit many years ago that said, when Gary Johnson was governor, that said, the legislature cannot tell the school districts how to actually spend the budget. We just get to give them a chunk of money, and then it's out of our hands. And I think you're going to see that there's a lot of things that started to take a turn in the wrong direction, because I don't think the public knows that.
Gotcha.
I don't think the public knows that if you're really not happy with the way your school is running, it's not so much the legislature's fault. You need to be talking to your local school board, because they're the ones that have the ability to appropriate that money.
Sense. Tom, one of the things that really caught my eye is an interesting defense position that there's no proof that more money is going to accomplish anything. Kind of bring it down to street terms outside of legalese. And that's an interesting premise. Because how does one know, really? What do you make of that position?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, just look at the Democrats. Democrats are split on this particular issue. You have one camp that says that there's not enough money. And then you have another camp that says, well, more money is not going to fix the issue. And so, and that is basically, some of the predominant discussions that we've heard with Senator Stewart and then Senator John Arthur Smith. What do you hope to solve, I think, is the greater good? This is a 9-week trial, a lot of expense will go into it. Is it just more of a public relations ploy to expose the, inadequacies and deficiencies of New Mexico's public school system?
Interesting.
I don't know. Hopefully, it's a lot more than that.
Let's swing to something Dan mentioned. He mentioned our newly departed Education Secretary, Ms. Scandera. I want to get all your opinion here at the table about her job performance, so to speak. I don't want to say grade, but maybe it's a grade. Who knows? Going out, what's your sense of how she did here? Because we have higher graduation rates. We're doing better on a number of things, and this secretary has had a difficult ride this whole time.
Yeah, and just by means of disclosure, I meant to say this early on. We have a couple of clients in the public education sector, but the point of view that I'm sharing is strictly my own.
Appreciate it.
When you look at Secretary Scandera, I appreciate her tenacity, and I know that I'm probably the only one at the table today that's probably going to, really. I liked her style. I thought she was good. I think her interview, a lot of the post interviews that she's done with a lot of the national publications, have really kind of provided some insight to her particular approach that perhaps we didn't get here in New Mexico, because everybody's focused on the controversy.
That's right.
One of the approaches that I thought she used, which ended up really being to her demise, I thought, was that she bypassed the principals and she bypassed the superintendents because there was so much lack of organization there. And as a result, she went right to the teachers. And what that did at that point is it raised the ire of the different teacher unions in the state.
And once that started, it was on.
Yeah,
just a little bit short on time on this one. Sorry about that. Sophie, your sense of Ms. Scandera and her performance?
I think that regardless of whether the measures she put in place were effective or not, and I think there's a lot of disagreement about that. I don't think that we're going to look back in 10 years and say, oh, those were the golden days of education in New Mexico. How could we have survived without Hannah Scandera? I think there's a big sigh of relief that's gone up since she's left.
It's out there. That's true. Alicia, what do you think?
I agree. I think Secretary Scandera was completely out of touch with what was happening in classrooms and what teachers needed in terms of professional development, what students needed. and she'd never really set foot in a classroom. So I'm really looking forward to a change of the guard and hoping to see someone who actually has some classroom experience and some teaching experience.
Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, like Tom said, I think her ability to focus on a task and get it done was commendable. I think
she fought through a lot.
I do think we'll look back in 10 years and say, there's some good things that she did, because in New Mexico we get distracted. Someone says no, and all of a sudden we don't move anywhere. And she powered through it. I think her demise was her inability to acknowledge if she made a mistake and go forward and say, okay, I'm going to meet with the teachers. The teachers union is angry. Well, let's get the principals and let's have a conversation. I think that same tenacity also was where she would say, the minute someone took her on, she drew a line in the sand, and I think she could have made her stay a little more pleasant than it was. But she seems to have been happy while she was here, and I think she accomplished some things, probably the right time for New Mexico, because the conversation about accountability, educational reform, I think is so much further down the road than it would have been with someone that just said, hey, I'm just here to get along.
There you go. Next subject, mental health issues and addiction are often intertwined. About a third of people dealing with mental illness are also struggling with substance abuse. Yet for years, the two were put in silos. That started to change, however, as doctors and researchers learn more about the underlying issues around addiction. But challenges remain in funding, integrating services, and addressing stigma. In the final part of our series this month on behavioral health in New Mexico, correspondent Megan Kimrick talks with experts and community members about treating those two needs together to ensure better outcomes for individuals and communities.